Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, an advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids and student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. I'm so happy to have my friend, Dr. Terisha Lee, on here. We have traveled in the same circles for a long time, and we finally actually have gotten to be with each other in person. And this is fun to have you on here right now. But let me tell people about you, and then I'm going to let you fill in the blanks I left out. You describe yourself as a dedicated faith and disabilities parent educator and practical theologian, which I love that. Practical theologian. You often don't hear those two words together. And you're also an advocate and passionate about the intersection of faith, race, and disabilities, which I want to talk about more in a minute. And you're the founder and president of FamAuLee Dynamics, and she's going to tell us what that means. And you're committed to the motto, God's ability is greater than any disability. You're also the co-host of a podcast with our friend, Dr. Lamar Hardwick, called FamAuLee, which I love the name that you came up with. And you equip families, churches, and organizations to embrace inclusive, faith-filled practices. There's a lot more to you than this. So tell us more about you. Who are you?
That's the condensed version.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you so much, Kim, for having me. When I saw you, we embraced like old friends.
We did. I may have kissed your face. So.
Yeah. I didn't mind. I did not mind at all. It was amazing. Oh, but thank you so much for having me. So I am, it's funny. I first call myself a parent educator, because I received my master's in child and family studies with an emphasis in parent education 10 years before I even became a parent. So I always wanted to work with families. I always wanted to work with children, but I wanted to work with them in the intersection of their theological beliefs. So that's where the practical theology and the parent education comes in. So I've always been active with faith groups. I've always been active with faith-based nonprofit organizations. I just found that there was a missing link in ways that I could support and help families more if I focused on parenting, family dynamics, child development, things like that. So that's kind of what I went for.
Yeah. And you're pretty passionate about helping especially autistics be included. So why are you so passionate about this?
Oh my gosh. So the funny thing is, I can remember back, I didn't put all this together at the time, but now it makes sense. Isn't that how God works?
Yes.
As early as 11, I was in class, and they asked, did anyone want to forego their recess, our gym time, and go to special education and help teach kids to read? So at 11,
wow.
Instead of my classmates taking a hard left to the gym, I'd go straight down to the special education class, and I'd spend an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, helping teach kids how to read. That was my first interaction with autistic children and children with learning or developmental delays, I should say, excuse me. And even then I thought, well, I can help, but I didn't think, any more of it then. I can help. I can do that. And I want to help. And I didn't even realize I was the only person in my class that volunteered. I didn't even think about it. I just thought, I'm going to go help.
Right.
From there, I eventually, and all this makes sense now, but years apart, I worked in a group home with adults who had developmental disabilities and needed assistance. I didn't even think about it until later that this had been a path God had been putting me on all along, that I always had a heart for those who we didn't always give a voice. We didn't always give space. And sometimes people preferred, well, stay back there. And I just thought something's wrong with that. I don't like that.
So God has been weaving this as a through line through your life for a long time before you even realized it was anything different.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the title of your organization, FamAuLee Dynamics, I
Yes.
love where this name came from. So tell us how that came about.
So, FamAuLee Dynamics is family, autism, and Dr. Lee. So, I realized through working with churches, through working with community organizations, that there were a lot of parents who just did not know. It wasn't that they didn't want to know, it wasn't that they weren't seeking information. It's that the typical pediatric visit is going to be about 20 to 30 minutes. Most of that is waiting. But once the
Right.
doctor gets in the room, they're in and then they're out to the next patient. So there was no one taking time to explain to them. There was no one. I've had parents stop me in the parking lot with tears in their eyes. Did I do something wrong? Did I do this? Should I have drank more water? Should I have taken 2 prenatal vitamins? Is this my genetics? And then on the other hand, I've had people stop me in church parking lots and say, well, I did have premarital sex. Is this because I
Mm,
sinned? So I created FamAuLee Dynamics because I was having conversations with these parents. I was giving out my personal cell phone number, and it got to the point where I had to stop taking the calls because I have a family and I needed to take care of them. And I just didn't have the time to take all these one-on-one calls. So I developed a parent group. We met once a week. We talked. It was called 828, and it was based on Romans 8 and 28. All things work together for good. But it was also a bit of a caveat because I knew a lot of parents didn't have time to remember every third Thursday, every second Wednesday. They're not keeping up with the calendar like that.
right.
So every 8th and 28th of the month, regardless of what day it fell on, we met at 8 o'clock.
Oh, that's fantastic. I can remember that.
Simple, easy, exactly. And parents had enough, caregivers had enough, grandparents had enough. I didn't want to make this hard. So the 8th and the 28th of every month at 8 o'clock, we met and we talked. What's on your heart? Let me pray for you. But then I give just a small message and not a sermon. I wasn't trying to preach to them. If anything, I just wanted to inform them. Let's talk about genetics. Let's talk about medical terminology versus social terminology. Some people can be really upset when you say things. I did a 30-second clip where I said autism is a neurological disorganization. And some people were upset about that. And they said, it's not, it's just different. And I said, we have to talk about the difference between a medical term and a social term because different holds no medical significance.
Mm,
It's too ambiguous. And we need medical terms to help us in our journey, but that doesn't mean we're speaking less. It just means we need those defining factors to help us in our medical journey. And some of those parents, they were like, oh, I get it now. Other parents, I've never even heard that. How? So it was leaving space for them. So FamAuLee Dynamics was birthed out of, I was just helping people at my kitchen table. I was just helping people on my cell phone. And it finally got to a point where I had to organize it because it was too much to take on without some type of order.
So, as you're having parents around your kitchen table, meeting with them, what are some things that surprised you about maybe the struggles they were having
Hmm.
and the joys and fun that they were having in their life?
Oh gosh, the joys. Oh, there were so many joys. Um, I think one of the greatest joys was the amount of love, the redefining of unconditional love. Parents realized, my preconceived notions were that love looked this way.
Right.
But I've learned now, to look at love in a different way. I've learned a different level of patience and kindness. And not only am I more patient with my child with a disability and my neurotypical children, but I'm more patient with other people and their children. It's almost like that gift of patience keeps giving. It's giving not just to their family, it's now giving to the community. And I love hearing that. I love hearing that. And some of the things that surprised me that weren't always great was how it could divide marriages.
Mm-hmm.
How dad may feel one way, but mom may feel another. How some spiritual leaders were just uninformed. So I still have to regularly, and I wish I could say this was years ago, but it's not. I still have to regularly have the conversation about demons. And one parent may believe it, the other parent won't. So then you have to kind of struggle for the relevance of intervention and services as opposed to ignoring it and praying and having greater faith, which ultimately is shame and blame.
Yes.
And having to try to walk a parent through that, the saddest part is some parents just aren't ready. And if they aren't ready, there's nothing I can do but pray for them and walk away, unfortunately.
Is there, so I understand that sometimes we need to pray for them and walk away. I also understand that we don't tell them just pray harder and have greater faith. Absolutely. I agree with you. That's shaming them. But as community around families who may be parenting kids with disabilities, what are some things that we can do to best support them?
Mm. I think one of the first things we can do, and I've been talking about this briefly with some of my parents and how to navigate the conversation. There's two things that I think we can stay away from, and that's cause and cure.
Mm.
A lot of parents want to know, how do I avoid the conversation of cause and cure? So I often tell the community, don't lead with cause and cure. Most parents have researched, looked up, Googled. You're not telling them anything new. And even if they haven't heard about this magical probiotic,
Right.
it honestly, yeah, we're not curing people through probiotics. We're not curing people through Epsom salt. We're not curing people through, give them 2 extra hours of sleep and 2 extra hours of outside time,
Right.
and that can be hurtful because sometimes parents can take on that shame. We're not talking about, well, those vaccines. This isn't a time when, as a community, when we find out one of our loved ones, whether it be a family member or a friend, has a child or a loved one with a disability, let's not lead with conspiracy theories. This isn't the time to affirm, well, I hear it's the food. I hear it's the vaccines. Well, I hear it's metal. I hear those can be not only out of touch, they can be really insensitive. So I
Yes.
always encourage people, let's allow the caregiver, the person with the disability, the parent, to lead the conversation. How are you feeling? What are you comfortable talking about? And let's talk about that. And there may be some areas that they just don't know about. We all struggle with some areas. How do I broach this? I don't know exactly. Let's give that grace. Let's give space for it. Lead with kindness. Kindness is so underrated. Simple
Agree.
kindness can go a long way. I think we should definitely, definitely make room for it.
I agree. I appreciate you telling us what not to talk about. And really, we don't have to talk that much to support somebody, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Presence makes a big difference. Having my best friend here locking arms with me, we haven't said a word, but you're here. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That says a lot. We don't have to have the answers and the quirky comebacks and that witty wisdom to get. Listen, just be here with me. And that's great. And
Right.
it's enough.
Right. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. You not only do you work with parents, you work with a lot of churches,
I do.
helping them create spaces for every person to belong. What do you think? Like, if somebody's, and I talk to a lot of churches too, when someone's saying, I want to get started, but I don't know how, or it's too hard,
Mm.
or it's too, what do you say to them?
I usually start by saying it doesn't cost $1 million.
That's right.
Most people are so nervous that it's going to be too expensive. Our budget's already tight. Wait, I'm like, it doesn't cost a lot of money. That's usually the first conversation I have. Let's get budget out of the way. Now, let's talk about the basics. The basics of a disability ministry isn't a separate classroom and a separate facility. It's learning how to integrate people who may learn and who may participate in a different manner. So
Right.
whether you have a faithful volunteer, a grandmother, or even a responsible teen, let's create a buddy system. I think Sandra Peebles is amazing. And she has great books and resources. You
I
have great
agree.
resources in your book. And I always encourage people, read YouTube videos. There's a lot out there that you don't have to pay thousands of dollars for, but bringing people into your classroom, regardless of their ability, and meeting them where they are is our first step. Can we accommodate them? Yes. Are we willing to accommodate them? Because a lot of churches I've talked to, the first thing I do have to ask is, you see this need. Now, are you willing to address it?
That's a great question. That's a great question to ask. And what do they say to you usually?
So I've gotten a myriad of answers. Some say, yes, but we will not change anything about our Sunday morning service. Sunday morning has to stay the same. So what can we do outside of the sanctuary? Some people say, yes, in what capacity do we need to adjust? And it's not always, it has to be a dramatic change. Again, for most people, I say it starts with your leadership. What works for you? So we go through a leadership training. From the leadership training, I say it's not my responsibility to train your volunteers. It's yours. Because you're going to take what I teach you and adapt it to your unique population. I can't tell you about your parishioners. You have to know them and their needs. So I may say this about autism, but then you have people in your congregation who have different disabilities, or they may be in a different space on the spectrum. So you have to get to know them. It's about building community, or are we just serving customers? If we're just serving customers, then come in, take what we give you, give us an offering for it, and leave. But if we're building community, then it's your responsibility to get to know your people. Get to know what they need. Is that a survey? Possibly. Is that a conversation? Possibly. Is that a small group where we're leaving space to get to know each other more than just the 5 or 10 minutes it takes you to walk to the parking lot after church? Possibly, and I'd encourage that. But you ultimately have to decide that. If anything, I consider myself a conversation partner, not an expert. I'm helping you have a conversation on how you can best serve your community so that anybody and everyone, regardless of their ability, can boldly come before the throne of grace and declare Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
I love the question, like, do you recognize the need? And then are you willing to address it? For people who are saying, I'm really to address it in these spaces, but not this space.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, the question then is, so if that's how we respond, are we really willing to address it? Because shouldn't it encompass every aspect of the church community?
Yeah. I'll say this. It's still a very new conversation for a lot of churches. Not new in general, because disabilities has been around. But those churches who say, I'm willing to address it in this space, but not this one, I'm willing to have the conversation because that's step one.
Great.
Now, if we can have step one, then maybe as we continue and you see that this isn't some life-altering, oh my gosh, it's going to ruin my... No. This is serving. This is discipleship. I'm glad I got to know you as a pastor because now I see that one of your principles is discipleship. Let's talk about that. What does that look like? And then they say, oh my gosh, you're right. So it's leaving space for them to get the revelation and not me to give them the answers, which is, again, why I say I'm a conversation partner, because it's better when you get the revelation than I do.
Absolutely.
You know what is funny? And I don't tell many people this, but I'll tell you, this is a Kim Botto exclusive.
Oh, thank you.
I started with practical theology and congregational research studies. I would go in to churches, congregations, and help them with programming and retention. Because those were areas that I really want to make sure our program is effective, and I want to make sure we're able to not only gain members, but retain members. So I go in with that, and then I come with a right hook. So have we looked at this population? Are there any populations that we aren't serving? I notice you all have a ramp, but do you have any other ways that you are being accessible to persons with different abilities? Well, we've never had that conversation. We've never thought about that. Well, great. Here's your report on your programming. Here's your retention rate. Now let's talk about this disabled population and are we accommodating them? It was getting the door open, and I knew programming and retention would get the door open, and then having that conversation, because some of those same pastors who would talk to me about programming and retention didn't want to talk to me about a disability ministry. Oh, we don't have anybody in our church like that. We don't need that. That's not our ministry.
So if someone does say to you, Terisha, we don't have anybody with disabilities, I mean, obviously every community has people with disabilities.
Mhm.
So what's your response?
I usually don't tell them, I show them. So that's where that I would lead with programming and retention. So the first
Yes.
thing I would say is, well, let's do a congregational study. What is that? That's looking at our demographic. Well, based on your demographic, because I'm a practical theological researcher, my PhD is in practical theology. I had to do a research study to graduate. So I took those skills and applied them to the church. So what I would tell a pastor when they say, we don't have anyone in our congregation, and you'd be surprised how many pastors believe that. I didn't feel like telling them would only create a back and forth, and I didn't want that space. I want to keep
Mm-hmm.
this an open and friendly conversation. Let's look at your demographic. So based on the demographic, in this zip code alone, whatever the statistic is, percentage of people have disabilities. So does that mean you aren't reaching your community? Does that mean no one within this population is coming into your church? And if they're not, then that's another conversation. Let's talk about it. Because that's a part of
Mm-hmm.
retention, right? So let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. And then they start saying, oh, well, and then it's also defining it. Well, can you tell me more about how you define a disability? Oh, well, and it'd usually be a limited or, understanding. And I'd say, well, let's talk through some of that. Does anybody in your church have this? Does anybody in your church ever talk to you about that? I'd say, oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
It's just a lack of awareness, and
It
you're
is a lack
helping
of awareness.
make them aware.
So by having that conversation, they don't feel like I'm preaching to them or I'm condemning them.
Right.
But oh, so speaking with Dr.
No.
Lee, I've now learned that we actually have quite a few people in our congregation who may be differently abled, who may be disabled, who may be uniquely abled, whatever the terminology is that you're comfortable with. So now how do we best accommodate them? Or have we just ignored them and hope that they can catch what we're throwing out? And if they can't, oh well, but if they do, great.
Right. Right. You were talking about asking them about people in their congregation who might be
Yeah.
differently abled.
Mm-hmm.
And I love your idea to look at the demographics. I always,
Yes.
for when working with people who serving with kids and students, I always say, look at what the school demographics are, kids on IEPs, and that gives you some hint. But I do, or let me ask you, do you think that people often, when they look at disabilities, it's more about mobility issues? You mentioned the ramp.
Yeah.
Um, so when we are just looking at mobility issues and wider stalls in the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
what are we missing? What other things should we be thinking about as we try to make our environment inclusive for everybody?
Oh, great question. You're absolutely right. Most people think if I don't have anyone with a wheelchair or who needs sign language, those are the only things they think of. And I've even had a ministry say, well, we have a dance ministry that does sign language. So that's our deaf ministry. And while that's wonderful, it's
Right.
inadequate. So let's have that conversation. But some of the other things we are looking at is we're limiting disability to what we can see and what we can experience, which is actually very ableist because we're saying you're disabled based on my understanding interpretation, not your lived experience. So your lived experience may not be apparent to me because I'm not in intimate relationship with you. I'm not your best friend. You don't call me every day. I've never been to your home. So I don't know how you live day to day. So if I don't see how it's affecting you and all I see is the 2 hours you are on Sunday morning and you present typically, I'm now saying that based on my perception, oh, you're fine. You don't need anything extra. You don't need any other accommodations. So people tend to hide behind that. Well, I don't want to cause any problems. I don't want to ask for too much. I don't want to be a burden. I'll just figure it out. So then that's when we have to talk about neurological disorders. We have to talk about hidden disorders, invisible disorders, what they call them. We have to talk about emotional and behavioral disorders. And a lot of people will say, I've never heard this. I've been to seminary. We never talked about this. Where was I supposed to learn this? And
Where were
unfortunately,
they supposed to learn it?
well, I would hope seminaries would teach
Me
about
too.
ministering to different populations. But unfortunately, I've only heard of maybe one program. A friend of mine, I haven't spoken to in maybe 5 years, but we're Facebook friends. messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm in seminary in Arizona and I just took a class on disabilities and faith." And I said, "Praise God. Yay." But it's not common. It's not common. And if I'm honest, most of the pastors and leaders that I work with, they're reaching out because they're directly affected. They have a grandson, a child, a loved one.
Yes. Yes. I was talking to a leader of a large ministry just a few weeks ago who was super passionate about it. This is sad. I'm thinking about this right now. He was so passionate about it that I said, "So what's your story?" Like, and he has a child. As we continue this conversation, I want to let you know my new book, Boundless Hope, is available now. If you're looking for more resources, strategies, and encouragement to assure every child feels like they belong, this book is for you. Visit kimbotto.com or Amazon to order your copy today. So, Terisha, back to the intersection of faith, race, and disabilities. As we look at, particularly, you mentioned marginalized people.
Yes.
What are some cultural sensitivities that we should be aware of?
So that's an awesome question. So I like to look at it as oftentimes we are trying to help people with different abilities adapt to this world. We aren't always looking at how we can adapt and accommodate them. There are certain cultural nuances that can totally and completely be overlooked. Say, speech example. Most times the goal of speech is to get a neurodiverse child to speak in the way that most neurotypical people do. A call and response, complete sentences, things of that nature. There are certain cultural signs. It could be a nod. It could be a fist bump. It could be a huh, that are habitually overlooked as signs of communication that are often acknowledged within minority communities, that are not always acknowledged within speech. Something as simple as an AAC device or a picture scale were often given white faces and said, "This is you. This is you. Do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need to sit down? Do you need to?" Well, if we talk about autism specifically, a lot of children and adults with autism have trouble associating themselves. So if you put a white face in front of a black child and say, "This is you, this is you,"
They're going to go, "No, it's not."
that can be a bit confusing. I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation to say, can we ensure that our minority children have minority, because I do work primarily with children, but I also work with adults as well. Can our children have minority pictures? Can they have pictures with brown skin? If you can't find them, we can make them. If you can't make them, we'll take pictures of them.
Right.
So for friends, family, and loved ones that I've worked with personally, I've taken pictures of them happy, sad, mad. Okay, is this what? And that helps associate, this is me. Well, those are some cultural sensitivities that are often overlooked when working with the disabled population. We can put up, the hands to pray, but those hands are only one tone, not taken into consideration. We have different tones in the classroom. Things like that are things that we can definitely consider when we're trying to accommodate people with different abilities.
Those are great ideas. Thank you for those. So you talked about people who are differently abled might just say, "Oh, I'm fine. I'll figure it out." How does the church then approach them? Because I know we have this question in kids ministry too, where we might see that a kid is struggling in a particular area. And I think what happens is, out of fear or because they don't want to offend anyone, there isn't a conversation around that.
Yeah.
So what is a good first step if you think there might be an extra accommodation that could be helpful?
Mm-hmm.
What do we say? How do we start?
So it is my personal belief that every ministry should have a family pastor. Churches love to say we are family friendly, we believe in the family, God loves the family, but you rarely hear about, well, when's the last time you had a parent educator? When's the last time you all had family service? More times than not, most people go to church on Sunday. The parents go this way, the kids go this way, the teens go that way. And all coming together is on special occasions. I always encourage pastors, you need a family pastor or a liaison. What is that? That is someone who isn't directly in charge of any of the systems on Sunday morning, who is building relationships. I am more apt to talk to you about something personal in my life because I have a relationship with you. You're not trying to take advantage of me. You're not using me as a statistic. You don't want to use me as a Sunday morning example of why we should be grateful. You build relationship with me. You ask about me. You ask about my children. How's your husband? I didn't see you last Sunday. Someone who is building relationships with a family, who isn't just there to sign your kids in or sign them out, which is very important and not to be diminished, but someone who is actually building relationship, it's easier for them to come and say, hey, Kim, I talk to you every Sunday. I get my hug. I love you. I love your kids. Your husband's amazing. But I really wanted to ask you a question about your little one.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we just have a conversation? And you know what? We don't even have to have it Sunday morning. Can we get coffee on Tuesday? Building, again, it goes back. Are we building community or are we just serving customers? What are we doing? What is our ultimate goal? If we are really building community, then we have to do it in relationship with one another. It's not just the pastor. It's not just the youth pastor. It's not just the disability pastor. We have to build relationships with one another.
That's so good. Yeah, that's a t-shirt phrase. That's really good.
Absolutely. I love a good t-shirt.
Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about the church and talking about terms and lingo, one thing I really see churches struggle with is, what do we call it? Because in some ways, calling a disability ministry actually excludes some people that need extra support. I look, especially with looking at kids and students, those who have experienced trauma, those who might not have a diagnosis that is considered a disability, but yet they need accommodation. So what is good language as we talk about this?
I always start my trainings with disability is not a bad word. It's not a bad word. We can say it. But as a community, you decide what you're comfortable with. So on my throughout my journey of training pastors and nonprofit organizations, I've heard a million names. I've heard unique abilities, unique ministries. I've heard acronyms. The church may be called, I'm just going to make up a name. This isn't an actual church, but we're going to call it, Second Baptist. And they'll call them, these are our Second Baptist friends. So the Second Baptist friends is terminology for, our friends who may need a little more assistance. They come up with what's comfortable for them. One thing I always say, though, is don't make it so nuanced that the people who need you can't find you.
Yes.
So it can be, the third rock of Jesus, best friends who we're supporting and loving. But if I'm confused by that,
right,
and I need the service, we may want to, flesh that out a bit more. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with unique abilities, different abilities, creating an acronym that you make sure is written out in the church. And we're not just speaking exclusively in acronym form, because those who come to visit, they aren't going to know what that means. But creating that language around what you're comfortable with, that's better for your community than me giving you okay, use this. Yeah. And most churches are really good about that. They're really good about, okay, well, we decided this is the name of our ministry.
How involved? I mean, I would think we want people with disabilities to be involved in the naming and creation. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, definitely. We want to have them to have a seat at the table. Absolutely. But we're also taking into consideration a gamut of different abilities. So some people may not be able to articulate, right. But those who can, let's absolutely ask them, what would you like to call it? What would you think would be a great name? Let's create boards. I always talk about, just the same way I talk about that liaison, I always talk about create a committee. we aren't just relying on one voice, but we're looking at parents, we're looking at caregivers, but we're also looking at individuals, whether they are teenagers, young adults. Let's not discredit that teen with ADHD and say, well, when they get older. No, no, no. Let's give them some responsibility. Let's give them some ownership in this ministry too. And you'd be surprised. Some of our teens who were labeled as troubled, who had a different ability, who just couldn't focus in the same way, so they became disruptive, totally changed once they were on the committee. And it was like, well, Dr. Lee, we just wanted to call you and let you know that the same kid we thought we were going to have to ask to leave and couldn't participate in the ministry anymore is the president.
He's now a leader. Mm-hmm.
And he brings his own agendas. He calls the meeting to order.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. And I'm like, that's because you made room for him to worship and serve differently.
That's right.
Kudos to you. Great job.
That's right. Yeah, so often, if you feel like you don't have a voice, then you start using your voice, your behavior to get attention, and often it's in an unattractive way.
Absolutely.
So that's a great idea. I wanted to, before we end, I wanted to make sure and go back to, the podcast that you and Lamar co-host.
Yes.
You said that you're about the intersections of faith, race, and disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about what those intersections look like.
Absolutely. So there is a unique nuance when you are intersecting different roads of life. And I found myself assisting populations that were historically marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
So in addition to having a disability or a loved one with a disability, they also were dealing with poverty, lack of health care, low education or no education. And those factors matter because they determine how you not only see the world, but they determine how you see your abilities. So if you're told you're less than, you believe you're less than, and you function as such. So instead of taking advantage of these programs, you're saying, well, I can't do anything. I'm like, wait, no, let's talk about this. So it's having those conversations, but leaving room for the effects of racism, leaving room for the effects of sexism, and having those conversations, but also enlightening people to understand how this may be a disadvantage. This may be an area where you're marginalized, but you're still amazing. You're still loved by God. You are still a beloved member of society, and your voice matters. So let's see how we can help you amplify your voice, even if it's not a physical voice. Even if it's not a physical voice. I have recently started to learn sign language. I do not have a friend or family member or loved one that is deaf or hard of hearing, but I have been in the room with people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and they were unable to communicate other than writing on a piece of paper. So I said, if you really value what they have to say, maybe I can take a class. Maybe I can take a class so that the next time I'm in that room, they don't have to scribble their thoughts as quickly as they can so that they can be a part of the conversation. I can actually communicate with them and let them know you're valuable too. And it's actually been really fun learning a new language. It's been really fun. And when my daughters, I have 8-year-old twin daughters, when they found out mommy was learning a new language, they said, well, we want to learn too. And now me and all 3 of my children are learning sign language.
That's great. It also applies to kids who have differences.
It does.
Kids who are autistic, they have different ways that they communicate, and we need to stop and learn how they're communicating. Instead of forcing them to always communicate in the way that we're communicating, we need to stop and figure out how we can best communicate with them. And I love the example of sign language because it applies in so many different areas.
It does.
Thank you for, I just really appreciate you being on here today. And we always like to end with just some quick questions. Okay. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's your favorite way to unwind?
Oh, a good book. I just got a really good book that I'm starting to read at this conference I went to, and I was fortunate enough to get it signed by the author. I was so excited.
What book might that be?
Shameless plug. It's a book written by this amazing author by the name of Botto.
You're so
I'd encourage
funny.
everyone to check it out.
You're so funny. That's right. I did sign that for you.
Yes.
What's the most memorable gift from your childhood?
Oh my goodness. The most memorable gift? Oh, I don't know if this is going to be a great and deep answer, but I remember the Christmas I got a Teddy Ruxpin. Like it was the best day of my life. When I got this talking bear who would read me bedtime stories. That was like the best.
I think that's a great memory.
Oh.
No apologies for that. Hey, you work with tons of families. What do you wish that more people knew?
Oh, goodness. I wish that more people knew how lonely it can be to parent a child with a disability. I wish more people knew that their presence without a word of advice or a deep word of knowledge from God, their presence alone is sometimes okay.
Yes.
I wish they knew that children with disabilities want to be loved and included just like neurotypical kids.
Terisha, what's a fun fact about you?
So a fun fact about me is I have 2 older brothers and we are all parents of twins.
Oh, how fun. So what are the ages?
So my oldest brother's, his twin girls are 22. Then my next brother has boy-girl twins that are 18. And then I have twin girls that are 8.
What is something for those of us who don't have twins? What is something that we wouldn't know about parenting twins?
Oh my goodness. Something you wouldn't know. That it's amazing. It's amazing. It is funny to see them wake up and the first thing they do is look for each other.
Mm-hmm.
Even as babies, they would babble and it would almost be conversational.
Mm.
And I would just be in awe. Sometimes to calm them, I would put them together as babies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just as much as they would cry for being wet or food or tired, they would cry for each other.
Right. Well, yeah, they built a relationship for many months.
Yeah.
Before they even laid eyes on you, their mama. That's good. Okay. I want you to complete this thought.
Okay.
Every child
is amazing.
They are. That's actually biblical. Fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes.
One translation actually says amazing.
Yes.
So as we sign off here, what's a final word of encouragement that you have for those working to create spaces for every child to belong?
For those who are creating space for every child to belong, I want to say, be not weary in well-doing. It is hard work. Sometimes it is thankless work. Sometimes you can accommodate a man, woman, or child and feel like you still didn't quite accommodate them enough. But don't give up. Continue, because your efforts are not only seen, but they are leaving impressions of the love and the glory and the goodness of God that a lot of us need to see. Even if we aren't the one you are directly accommodating, we need to see that love of God through you. Kudos to you. I am praying for you, even if I don't know your name. And I want to encourage you to keep going.
Yes. It doesn't just benefit the person who's receiving that. We all benefit from that.
Yeah. So
Dr. Lee, if people would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way to connect with you?
So I am on Instagram as Terisha_Lee. I am on Facebook as Terisha Lee and LinkedIn as Terisha Lee. So definitely check me out.
All places. Well, Terisha, thank you so much for being on here. Thank you for all the work that you're doing with churches, with families. I really appreciate your work, and I'm glad that we have connected. So thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much. You are doing amazing work, and you have certainly helped me and many other parents that I can't even name to you right now, but your work has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.